I'd like to welcome to the stage now Kyu Lee from GAMEVIL Com2US USA, who will be chatting with Ric Cowley, the editor of PocketGamer.biz. Do we have you guys here? We do. Welcome. Thank you very much for being part of the Global Trends track. Let's just get you folks fired up. Ric is the editor of PocketGamer.biz, who's busy this week. He's going to be available in Discord and like the journalist bar during the course of the week, and also I think hosting some roundtables and things. But Ric, I'm going to hand over to you now, and I'll catch you. I'll catch you in a few minutes' time and help you curate some of these questions. But over to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dave. Yes, as previously mentioned, my name is Ric Cowley. I am the editor of PocketGamer.biz, and I am here with Kyu Lee of GAMEVIL Com2US. Kyu, if you want to introduce yourself to everybody watching.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kyu Lee from GAMEVIL Com2US. We're one of the oldest mobile game publishers that's still living around. We started our mobile business since 2000. And I run the US office for the company, and I also mostly interact as a business development person for the Western counterparties, and it's very nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. And so we're going to talk about some of the lessons that you've learned as a publisher at GAMEVIL Com2US. One of the things I want to ask first, though, is what do you think that the role of a publisher is or should be currently in 2020?
Well, I think our role of the publisher has never really been fixed in certain way, because all the developers that we work with are all like different, so they all have their strengths and they have their weaknesses, and I think being a good partner is probably to complement their weaknesses and also boost their strengths, and I think that's one of the key focus areas. As a publisher, one of the key things that we constantly remind ourselves is like, we really have to add value. That's why publisher can exist. If we don't add value, there's no point of working with a developer, with a publisher as a developer. So I think we try to not really come up with a fixed solution for everybody, but more like a custom approach to all of the developers that we work with.
Cool. And I had a question here about how that role has changed because of the pandemic and stuff. I don't think that it really has, based on what you're saying, but has it changed in any sort of notable ways over the years that you've noticed in particular?
Yeah, sure. I think at the beginning, most of the developers that we worked with were really smaller shops, and the total development budget of a game was like even less than $1 million, which is amazing to me right now, because it was the good old days have all passed, So we used to develop games using maybe 100,000, 200,000, and even that, as a publisher, that's probably the financial support that we had to give to the developers. But now, like, I think our minimum project size is coming up at least $2 million to even launch a product. So, yeah. And I think so over the time, I think that's one of the biggest changes that we've noticed. The amount of choices that we can make on who we're working with have significantly reduced. So we've been much more careful on picking who we're working with, instead of like spreading out all the dollars. And also another big change is that games, everything is like live services. We're no longer in the era of pushing out products. We're pushing out services, and which means it's not like a 6 to 1 year relationship that we're building. Our game Summoner's War, it's been live for 6 years. So I think the relationship is going to be much more longer term than before, and for those reasons, I think the role of the publisher has changed. And I think since COVID, some of the biggest changes that we've noticed is that we have multiple outlets in how we're reaching our customers, and one of them were the offline meetings. And we also have an esports event where we gather a lot of fans to our event. And I think it's unfortunate that this year that we're probably going to transition all of that online. And we've also changed a lot of our offline meetings into like Zoom meetings, just like this. So yeah.
Cool. And so you've got all these years of experience. You've seen how the role has changed. The title of this talk is the lessons you've learned as a publisher. What would you say is the most important lesson that you've learned in publishing?
I think the relationship part is a very important part that I think, some people go after the financial support that they need. Some people go after the monetization help that they need or the live operation help that they need. But at the end of the day, it's just like recruiting a person for you. It's just like it's a relationship business, and I think and then I ask ourselves, what is the most important part of the relationship? I think it's being very transparent and communicating very well with your partner. There's a lot of partners that you meet within your lives, and I think working with a publisher is meeting your work partner. It's just like a coworker, and I think just like with coworkers, I think it's very important to be very transparent and upfront with the needs. Many times when you work with a publisher, you're not working always with the best team in that company too. I think there's the publisher, just like the developers have multiple teams, the publishers also have multiple teams. And I think if you're uncomfortable with a certain partner that you have, I think you should always be upfront talking to the publisher or whoever you are comfortable there, and tell them that you're not comfortable, you're not happy with this partner, and because we have a lot of other resources. I think those are the changes that we could make. And also I think I think a lot of developers, and just like us, we also self-defend ourselves in a lot of ways. We don't want to show our weak spots, but I think it's the same with the developers. I think a lot of the developers are not upfront with their weak spots, and I think, and that's why problems happen between developers and publishers, because we really don't know the needs that both parties have. I think those are some of the lessons that we've learned. We try to keep I think everybody's cool, and then they want to keep everything business. But I think it's a relationship. It's another form of relationship, and it's one of the most important relationships for the developers. And I think it's very important for them to be upfront and transparent with all of the communications that they're having.
Cool. It's interesting that you say that, because in my mind, I imagine that the publisher sort of has like there's a power dynamic almost between publisher and developer, and the publisher in a way is like almost a gateway to getting your game released and being successful. And from what you're saying, it's kind of like it's developer and publisher needs to work together and find a synergy, rather than the developer needing to have reverence to the publisher, if you will. Is that,
I think it also has to, like in the traditional space where the publishers handle all of the retail and all of that, they were actually basically controlling a bigger part of the revenue share. And I think only a small chunk went to the developer. But since everything is mobile, everything is digital, and since we're running everything as a service, most of our deals are done at a 50-50 deal with the developer, and it's equal partnership, and I think of course, we'd be happy to be in the driver's seat, but also we'd be happy to be in the passenger seat, depending on what type of strengths the developers have, and so when we work with like console game developers, I think they're excellent in their graphics and how they make the core of the game interesting. But for us, I think we're better in the monetization front or the live operation front. And so I think everybody has to represent their strength, you know, to build the strongest game possible for the consumers.
Cool. Yeah, that's all really interesting.
Mm.
So kind of moving away from that a little bit. So one of the things we were sort of talking about almost before we settled down with this fireside chat was kind of like, obviously your company's been around for a long time, and you've seen great successes such as Summoner's War, which, you know, fantastic background, by the way. But also like in that time, you're sort of bound to have some failures as well. And a lot of developers, they kind of, everybody should learn from failure. But one thing I wanted to know from you is like, how do you learn from failure? What do you look for in the failures to go, okay, this is what we'll do better next time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So every time we fail, we've failed much more times than we've succeeded. And I think that's very common in the video game industry. We're a very hit-driven industry, but I also feel like, yeah, we've failed a lot. We failed a lot, and I think one of the key things that we've been telling ourselves is, well, we can't think this is like a lottery ticket. It's never a lottery ticket. You know, we have to have a method or approach, you know, that we can continuously improve ourselves and cover our weaknesses. I think it's very hard. You know, I think one of the things, it's very hard to find the formula on how to succeed, but I think it's not that hard to find a formula on how not to fail. You know, so I think that's what we've been trying to build over the years. You know, we have a huge checklist. You know, we've worked with a lot of partners. We've done a lot of our internal games. We've launched more than hundreds of games, you know, ourselves. And every game has a different lesson. You know, it also helps us. You know, there's a lot of times where our processes were wrong. There are a lot of times where we didn't have enough checkpoints within the launch, and there were a lot of times also that we chose a wrong partner. You know, maybe there were times that we funded them less, maybe where we should have funded them more. You know, and so I think, yeah. There's so many failure examples. I can't list all of them, but you know, our checklist has been getting stronger and stronger, and I think that is actually one of the benefits that when working with a publisher. You know, as a developer, you probably don't have that many launch experiences. You know, we won't fail a launch because we haven't done the obvious things, you know, through the submissions or, you know, even through the launch processes or on the server side check, you know. But I think most of the good thing in the early days, most of the failures had to do with a lot of those technical type of issues. But I think we've overcome that, and it really boils down to the game, you know, and I think a lot of the times we knew this was the weak point for the game, but we still continued to launch the game, and it turned out that was the reason why it failed. So, and we learned how to control ourselves, you know, on not doing that in the future too. So I think as a developer, having that knowledge, experience with you is probably very helpful. And that could be one of the main reasons why you want to work with a publisher.
I'm going to take a question from the audience, just because this one I've just seen feeds quite well into that, and that relationship between publisher and developer. Dan Glazard asks, what lessons have helped you decide what game to publish, and what tools do you have now to judge the viability of a developer?
I think this was mentioned also in previous talks too, but I think there's definitely a comfort zone for our company, you know. So I think like, since we have been launching a lot of RPG games, I think we've tried almost every type of RPG that's out there. And I think when you really know the users, the user base that you're talking to, I think it makes things so much easier. and we know the channels that how we have to communicate with the users. We also know what KPIs that we have to look for, and I think as a publisher, you know, there's definitely a comfort zone, and for us, I think the RPG or sports category has been a comfortable zone for us, yeah, and I think every publisher has different colors, you know, and I think it's important to choose a publish. I don't think there's ever such thing as like this is the best publisher and this is the worst publisher. I think there's the right publisher and there's the wrong publisher, but I don't think there's a best and worst publisher. So I think it's very important to find if you are a really good fit with that publisher or not.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So if we just go back to my questions, unless anybody, oh, we do have another one, which I'm just going to move into because it also sort of feeds onto that. So an anonymous question asker asks, as a company that has both Asian and Western knowledge, what is your preference when choosing who to work with in terms of developers? So I guess, do you prefer working with Western developers or developers in the East?
So, well, I think like for Summoner's War, I think we were very lucky that we were one of the first games in the market, and I think that's one of the key reasons why it resonated so well in the West and also in the East. Yeah, my job is primarily focused on working with more Western developers, but I do. And I think we do have a mission that we want to be much more global than we were. But I think but we're definitely much more comfortable working with the Asian developers because, you know, we know how they work, and we know you know, a lot of the decisions are also made from our headquarters, and they're much more comfortable when they see a game that they like, you know. So if you come to us with a match 3 game, you know, we'd probably ask ourselves, can we really pull this out, and then can we really make it a success? You know, it's going to be a big question mark for us. Where if you come with a RPG game to us, you know, I think we'll probably know like how well it will do in the market. So, yeah, so kind of want to do both because we want to improve ourselves in the West, but I definitely feel like we've been better working with Eastern developers so far.
Cool. And so this actually leads into something that I wanted to ask about as well, is what would you say have been the biggest differences that you found between publishing in the West and the East? Like, are there any major sort of differences between the two?
I think in the early days, if you look at the App Store charts, you know, they were all like pretty much similar in a lot of ways. But nowadays, I think even in Asia, every single market is different. You know, the top charts are not the same. It's really hard to find common games in the top charts from Korea to Japan to China and even Southeast Asia. So I think and that's exactly the reason why we have offices in all of those separate regions. You know, I think as a publisher, if you want to publish a game globally, I think having local presence in the key markets is extremely important. And we have more than 10 offices around the world. And every time we come with a new game, you know, we ask all of those offices if it's a game that they like or not, you know, and their answers are always different too. So I think it's becoming much more difficult to create a game that resonates everywhere around the world. I think you know, when we used to pick games that will do well globally, just because the market size globally only made sense. But since each of the markets have grown so much individually, you know, even though it doesn't work anywhere around the world, and if you can be a top 10 game in Japan, you got to do it. You know? So yeah, I think yeah, the markets have matured so much, and there's so much more opportunity even just going after a niche segment of the market, that you don't really have to do something on a global basis every time.
Cool. Do you have another question from the audience that I will jump to? And another anonymous question would like to know, as your preference is working with RPGs and the markets and tastes are so diverse, how do you balance the right game to the right market without stretching the teams? I feel this would probably lead into having your the different offices around the world sort of working on these games, kind of thing, I imagine.
You know, so one of the things that we still haven't done is to, you know, we're still like I think almost all of our games are still one build global launch, you know. So we do live operations differently in each of the regions, but we don't separate the builds. I know there are a couple companies that separate their builds. You know, they do a separate launch for China, they do a separate launch for Korea, they do a separate launch for Japan, and they do a separate one for the Western market. But I think, you know, by doing that, you actually have to increase the size of your development team according to the markets that you address if you are splitting the builds. So even though on a live operational level, we may do things differently, we still try to do, and we may stagger the launches differently, but we still maintain one build across all of the countries. And I think that's very important if you want to work with a development team that can't scale as big, you know. And even for most of our internal games, we can't make 50-man teams to 100 or 200-man teams, you know. So I think for most of our games, we think even though there are sacrifices to be made, just focusing on some of the core markets that you have is more important, and then just do your best for the other markets. But if it doesn't happen, you know, just give up that opportunity has been the right approach for us, you know, because we think speed is very important when it comes to the development. And if you're trying to address the whole world, you know, it will slow everybody down.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because one of the things I'm really interested in is soft launch and you know, the soft launching a game and testing it in different markets and stuff. And from what you're saying, you kind of like we'll put a game out and see how it's working in different markets and then focus on those. Does that process happen during your soft launch? Is a soft launch like important to your publishing process?
Yes. So we do. You know, so we first do focus group test. You know, our company itself has about more than 1,000 employees ourselves, and you know, and when we get everybody to test our own games, we get about a couple hundred of responses, and we also get basic KPIs based off of that too. You know, we hold internal contest. You know, we'll give out like the latest iPhone. We'll give out a lot of these employee perks to play and test our own games. And based off of that, I think we do focus. So we do a focus group test, and when required, we also do closed beta tests. We open it more to the broader audience when we feel like our company's opinion itself is also skewed. And then and then based off of the data that we have from there, we choose which soft launch countries make sense for the games, and then we do soft launches, and then we start adding countries on top of that. You know, because I think one of the mistakes that we've done in the past was like just simply pressing the global launch button and then find out that we had a couple of errors that we could have addressed, and then regret that we can't go back, you know. And yeah, because I think a lot of things happen when you do the global launch, you know. You give the users your first impression. You really don't get a second chance, you know, when you just go ahead, you know. And also, like, if Apple happens to love your game, you know, and they give you tremendous amount of feature, and they see that your game had a bug, all the people rushed in, never come back, you know.
Yeah.
So we've experienced that before too, and I think it was very painful going through those type of experiences. So I think it's very important to do, you know, just soft launches, not only to look at user feedbacks, but also to even look at the technical stability of your games.
Yeah. I've got quite a few questions from the audience now, which is great to see, and some really interesting ones. So I'm going to throw this one at you. Anonymous person would like to ask, do you approach monetization of your games differently in different regions? Sort of leading on from everything else we've been talking about.
No, right now I think it's pretty much the same. We try to strike the right balance is what we're trying to do, but it's not like always 100% been like that. But for most of our key games, it's always been like, because the global community, they talk so much, you know, like on Discord, you know, it's not like a certain country user base just coming in, you know, they all talk to each other, and then they'll start complaining to you, you know, like, how come you gave this pack for so cheap in this region, and you're charging us this much, you know, it's not fair. Is what the users will say. There's a big backlash when we do we've done that, and I think for that reason, we've tried to do everything the same. I think there were a couple of occasions where we've released like micro packs, you know, sub-dollar packs in certain regions just to try out. But fundamentally, we think the world is flat enough, you know, right now that you can't really treat different regions differently.
Cool. Got another question here. Have you ever had a game land on your desk that you've passed on, and then it's gone on to be a success with another publisher?
Yes, yes. But you know, like, you know, if you go to conferences, you probably meet all of every developer meets all of the publishers, you know, and I think it's not a secret that, you know, that yeah, we've passed on so many success too, you know, and yeah, of course we'll talk about that internally, but I think when we make a decision, we don't make decisions based off of our gut. I think our decision making is very processed, and we try to fix our process if we find something like that. But yeah, you know, there's so many great developers, and it's a shame that we can't work with all of them. And yeah, if you're a good developer, every publisher knows that you're a good publisher, a good developer. So yeah, they won't just let you go.
Yeah. And we've got another anonymous question here. We're talking a lot about your experience in RPGs and obviously finding success in there. Someone would like to know, have you considered re-entering the hyper-casual space, and is there an opportunity for a Skipping Stone remake in the future?
Oh, nice. Yes, yes. I think as our games have become bigger and bigger, we feel like, you know, we're kind of losing where we started from. You know, we're trying to copy all of those AAA studios out there, but that's not where we started, you know, and that's not where all the fun is what we've been telling ourselves. And you know, there's too many politics is what we're also telling ourselves. You know, our company, it used to be so much more fun when we were just less than 100 people. Now we have more than 1,000 people, you know, so how can we innovate if our company is this big is the question that all of our executives ask ourselves. And so yeah, and I think great things can be small or big, you know. So, and we've you know, there's a lot of experiments that we're doing. We're doing under different brands, you know. So you may not notice, but yes, we've been going back and looking at hyper casual games, and yeah, a lot of, if you've been following a lot of the acquisitions that we've been doing lately, we've been acquiring a lot of small studios with great ideas.
Cool. I think we've just about hit time. So I see Dave is unmuting and appearing. So I'm
popping back in the window. Thank you, guys. Yeah, we're out of time there, which is a shame because I'm sure you could have gone on. That was absolutely fascinating. Thanks, Kyu. Thank you very much, and Rick, thanks for hosting there. I'm going to give you guys a round of applause. You'll have to imagine it coming from the all the rest of the people listening.
Thank you.
Hopefully, we'll get a chance to meet in person when the current situation has passed. But thank you very much, Kyu Lee, and for Rick for hosting. We'll hope you'll stick around and see the next panel. But thanks again.